So today's reading is from the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. O Arjuna, yoga is not for him who eats too much or who fasts too much, who sleeps too much or who sleeps too little. One who is temperate in eating, recreation, working, sleeping and wakefulness attains yoga, which destroys all suffering. Nowhere in the Gita does Krishna more clearly teach moderation than in these two stanzas. Moderation was taught also by Buddha and by many other great world teachers. If the teachings of Jesus Christ seem more extreme, quote, take no heed for tomorrow, take no money with you in your purse, it was because he taught at a time when people were too much bound by rules and too intolerant of views different from their own. They needed a stern teaching. Jesus also counseled compassion. However, as he showed, for example, in the story of the woman who taken in adultery, it is an interesting fact that the sterner approach to religion has been taken in India, where Krishna taught moderation, and that the more lenient approach, often bordering on outright materialism, has been taken in the so-called Christian countries of the West. It is ironic that in this basic respect at least, Christians have been truer to the teachings of Krishna, whereas Hindus have been truer to the teachings of Jesus Christ. Be all this as it may, moderation has also been a basic teaching of all the great masters. As Yogananda said, it is better not to go to extremes in self-discipline until you have achieved at least some realization. If a brittle twig is forcibly bent, it will snap. Nevertheless, the moderation counselled here by Krishna is hardly the materialist's idea of this concept. For worldly people, a few minutes of meditation every day may seem already to be bordering on fanaticism. Buddha, on the other hand, who taught moderation, sat determinedly under the Bodhi tree and didn't move from it until he had solved the mystery of life. Let this body dissolve, but until the mystery of life is solved, I will not move from this spot, will never move. He sat there for 40 days and nights until at last enlightenment came. The average person could only comment. So that's moderation. Moderation means doing everything you can to advance spiritually without pushing yourself too far.
Well, welcome everyone to our Sunday Satsang. Nice to be here. Yet another weekend with many more to come. This reading today is somewhat humorous. Can you hear me? It's a little bit humorous because when you watch, I laugh whenever I hear that particular stanza about not too much sleep, too little food, this and that, because having been around Swami Kriyananda and having read the lives of the saints, they practice anything but moderation. They seem almost super extreme in what they do. And I think that this stanza is more written for people who get too caught up in focusing on how they do things outwardly and making that the definition of balance, rather than those who are ready for something deeper. And Krishna somewhat confirms this with the very next two stanzas, where he says, when the chitta is completely calmed and centered inwardly in the self, the yogi, freed from every attachment and desire, attains the state known as union with God. A candle flame burns steadily, protected from the wind. Even so is the consciousness of that yogi who has subdued his chitta. So how Krishna went from too much sleep seems like a big leap, but in fact it's a direction, and Krishna really is advising for yogis, for those who are serious, that the real balance, the real harmony, the real finding of the center happens with working, balancing the chitta, and not focusing too much on the externals. And when we balance these waves of feeling, then this whole duality, too much, too little, starts to become balanced. There's a beautiful chant that Yogananda would sing, and the words are, "Oh, life is sweet and death a dream, when thy song flows through me. Oh, pray, all praise is sweet and blame a dream, when thy song flows through me. All health is sweet sickness a dream, when thy song flows through me. And so when that song of divine joy, it's not just a song of chanting and jumping up and down and being a bhakti yogi all the time. The song is the song of divine bliss, the song of God within us. When that is there, then all these things, there is no duality. There's no too much or too little. Whatever comes, comes of itself, and we can live in this joy no matter what is happening. And that's the goal of yoga, especially the mood swings of ups and downs, which I'll talk about, that the yogi comes to this sort of state of apathy in the middle where there's no feeling, no fun. Everything is really boring, because how can life be fun when you're not either partying or crashing or going up and down the roller coaster of life? And so people sometimes think that it's sort of this boring, apathetic state that the yogi is trying to achieve, when in fact it's just the opposite. We're going to get both. And when that comes, I've learned just to equally laugh at just the delight of God's play, knowing that you can trust that if you get a lot of praise, know and trust that at some point you're going to get a lot of blame. It's going to be pretty equal. And I've also learned that when I get blamed for something that I didn't do, don't react and try to justify yourself and say, oh, but I didn't do that, that's not me. Because it probably means that at some point you got praised for something that you didn't deserve or do. And when that happened, did you protest? No, not me, not me. And so try just to react or not react. React equally by going into God's joy and delight and humor at this amazing play of Divine Mothers and how she praises and blames, ups and downs, health, sickness, all these things. In this reading that we read last night at our Gita Satsang, Swamiji says really clearly that even pain, suffering, all these things is just an idea. Isn't that amazing? We give so much importance to all the stuff that we go through in life and the drama of it all. And Swamiji says it's just an idea. And it's just a thought, because it's just a dream of God's. And as Yogananda ji said, it's not an excuse to be lackadaisical because it's just a dream, it doesn't matter. In fact, it's an excuse to put out the best energy that we can, giving our lives completely to God, and just enjoying whatever comes to us. There's a story I've told that some of you have probably heard, and it shows how extreme the yogi can go in being balanced and seeing and not being touched by the ups and downs of the world. It was my wife, Maria, who she had, been diagnosed with cancer and had gotten in the brain, and the doctor said she had about 3 weeks to live, and she knew this. And somewhere about 1 or 2 weeks after that, when there was only 1 or 2 weeks left, there was so much joy and so much humor in everything that she did, and so much freedom. And the last time she was able to actually walk, because it was affecting her balance and everything, middle of the night she was coming back from the washroom and she was staggering back and forth across the room, just like someone who was completely drunk. And I rushed up and helped her and laid her down in bed. And as she was lying there in bed, me being very concerned and not very balanced emotionally at that moment and upset, I just heard her laughing and laughing quietly to herself. And I just had to know what she found so funny in that situation. And she just said 2 words. And for those who didn't know her, she grew up in the Soviet Union in Russia. And that was her background. And I think some of these Russian memories were coming back to her. And the 2 words she said, describing the way she lurched across the room back to the bed, she just said simply, Russian ballet. And she was just laughing at this Russian girl dancing ballet in her own style across the room. And there was nothing touched by something that would seem really, really negative and something that would cause sorrow and sadness or fear or concern, just completely untouched, and seeing the divine bliss in it, in that moment of something that was external. And so externally, quote, bad. And so this is the way out of the extremes. This is the way to find divine balance. It's the same with moods. It's to see God's joy in everything. And it only comes from meditation in the end. And when we practice meditation, we start to find balance in everything, and all the different ways that we can become unbalanced outwardly. Some of these ways, one of the ways that Swamiji talks about, is just people can become too imbalanced in terms of working with willpower and reason versus feeling and devotion or emotion. And these are sort of traditional masculine and feminine qualities. And Swamiji talks about this. This is important to have that balance also among all the other balances that we have. And he says here how to achieve that particular one. He says it here somewhere. Maybe he doesn't. So he says the way to have that balance is in meditation. And it's the same with these other approaches that we all take on the path of Raja Yoga. We have Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga. And Swamiji says that for all of us, we're not one or the other. If you're just one without the other balancing it, he said, the Jnana Yogi who just doesn't act and doesn't practice Karma Yoga, just sits in the armchair philosophizing and ruminating about life and becomes lazy. And the Karma Yogi who doesn't meditate becomes overly restless and forgets about God and doesn't really become Karma Yogi. And the Bhakti Yogi who just chants and doesn't meditate becomes actually too emotional because it just stirs up the outward emotions. And so the way out of this imbalance, the way to find balance, is not outwardly, it is inwardly. It's to work on ourselves, to work especially on our reactions. When Yogananda ji said, what comes of itself, let it come, he was saying that the extremes of life, when they come, try to find that joy inside. And you'll find that if you respond too emotionally or egotistically to praise, well, it's going to have to happen that when blame comes, you're going to also you're going to get pulled down by it, and you're going to have the same equally negative reaction, equal to how positive the emotional reaction was when you responded to your ego being fluffed up by something good that was said about you. And so meditation, this is something that Swami Kriyananda talked about, and in this reading today he talks about how to the worldly person a few minutes of meditation may seem extreme. How much meditation should we be doing? Well, Swamiji one time to one of the monks, the brahmacharis here in India, he said that he wished that he was younger. This was later, much later in his life, in the last few years. He said that he wished he was younger because he said, I can't meditate because of my body the way it is when I was younger. I can't be a good example. But when I was younger, I would meditate for 5 or 6 hours every day. And I would like you all to see that this is really what we should be aspiring to. And he was talking to the monks in particular. But what he was also saying is that don't limit and don't define balance as one thing. It changes over time. And this is why the saints can be seemingly imbalanced in their lives. And it's because they're acting from within to what is right for them at that right time. And so work at increasing meditation time. I mean, I would say work towards 5 or 6 hours a day if that's right. That said, I think even for maybe many of our monks right at this moment, 5 to 6 hours would be pushing it too hard and pushing it too far, too fast. And it would create resistance, because what happens when we push too far, too fast, it creates resistance. Resistance creates friction, creates heat, creates the mental unwillingness. And you'll see, I think we've all experienced this, where we've pushed too far in some way with meditation, with sadhana, and we have, maybe it starts with enthusiasm, and then it goes on with willpower, and then we start thinking, spiritual people meditate 5 or 6 hours a day, I'm going to meditate 5 or 6 hours a day, I'm a spiritual person, and this and that, and we just do it with willpower, and because we, quote, should be doing it. And then we lose enthusiasm for it, and sometimes people leave the spiritual path altogether because they push too hard and too far from a sense of willpower. But that said, yogis, if you look at the lives of yogis and the saints, they are so imbalanced and out of balance. And so all this also says, push yourself hard in certain ways, more inwardly, but especially with things that happen to us in life. And pain is one of these things. Try to respond non-reactively, non-emotionally, when anything comes to us, pain, suffering. And the way to do that is really only one. And it's that one that is beyond duality, because reacting to the ups and downs, praise, blame, pleasure, pain, is buying into duality. And the way out is only one, because it's literally one. It's divine union, it's oneness, it's Sushumna, where there is only one. There's Irda and Pingala are the ups and downs of the astral spine, and that's where the ups and downs of life happen to us. Swamiji once said that everything that happens to us, that causes us all of these moods and ups and downs, he said it only happens in here. It doesn't happen out there. And he gave the example that I've used before of somebody winning the lottery, and they get the winning lottery numbers, or at least they open the newspaper or whatever, they compare the numbers and they see, I just got the winning lottery numbers, I've won the lottery, I'm a millionaire now, or whatever it is. The energy rises up the Irda channel, they take an inhalation, they get all kind of excited and happy. And then they look at the newspaper and realize that it's yesterday's newspaper. Those are the old numbers. And then they sigh, they get depressed, their shoulders slump down, the energy goes down the spine. Nothing happened outwardly in that case, not a thing. It was all inside. Again, it was an inside job. And this is where we are tricked. Everything happens inside. And the duality and the oneness all happen inside. And this is where the Kriya Yogi really tries to understand that the practice of Kriya Yoga is to help us get in tune with divine bliss, which is not this apathetic middle ground. It's this one unconditional joy that is untouched by pleasure, pain, all the outward joys and sorrows, all the outward ups and downs. So try to use Kriya Yoga, not just when we meditate, but the principles of Kriya Yoga in everything that we do, everything that happens to us in life, trying to refer everything that happens to us in life that causes us to get pulled up or down, to understand that Kriya Yoga has given us the power to become free of that. And when we do get caught, and it happens all the time, we get caught, and I think for the yogi who has high ideals, when we do get caught in the emotions and in the reactions, and we realize it, we get disappointed and we get bummed, oh God, I got caught again. I thought I was beyond this, ups and downs of life. Just use that as actually a joyful starting point to start working on that particular approach again of getting centered in the spine. I'm going to finish by reading something Swamiji said just about the approach of the devotee. He said, the consciousness of humble spiritual people is still a part of universal duality. But the love and joy they express is a self-giving love, a joy not in specific things, but in the self. The more, however, one concentrates on the storm of duality, the more the divine quality of love becomes broken up into numberless desires and attachments, and joy into a host of petty enthusiasms. Where the waves rise high, their corresponding troughs are deeper by that much. Where love is broken up into many worldly desires, it will also manifest as antipathies. Likes are inevitably balanced by dislikes. If one's likes are intense, one's dislikes will be intense also. And the same also for joy. The more one's joy is centered in things rather than in the inner self, the more things one finds also to make him miserable. And it's so interesting the way Swamiji puts this. He says that trying to find happiness in things outside of ourselves, he's not saying that that is delusion. He's saying that it's God's joy, God's love, broken up into numberless little ways of finding happiness. But because it's outward, it's going to have its dual pole of likes and dislikes. And the path of Kriya Yoga, again, is to come back to that center of divine bliss. And again, it's not a center of apathy and boredom. It's a center of interest, enthusiasm, childlike joy in all things in life. And what happens is that you start to just enjoy the little things in life. Because, again, this is, Swamiji didn't teach and Master didn't teach that we should go through life and when something enjoyable happens, we should say, no, I'm a yogi and I'm not supposed to get caught up in these outer joys. But instead have a more childlike glee and joy in just the little things in life, and people that you see, in strange things that you see, in getting caught in horrendously bad traffic in Mumbai, or just the strangeness of life. Just try to find God's joy behind it. And you'll find that when you do this, this is the joy of the self that you're really seeing. And you can see that joy of the self even outside over time, in others and in situations. And again, it comes only from not investing in duality, praise and blame, pleasure, pain, the ups and downs, and investing more and more of our time and energy into tuning in and singing that song of God, when thy song flows through me. This is the way out, is one away from duality. So may they bless us, bless our efforts, and through their grace especially, may they help us feel that oneness and that divine bliss today and always. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.